Okay. So do you have the questions up or do you want me to read them again?
I actually have them up this week.
Okay. Do you want to read them or I can read them? I don't care.
We could switch off too.
Okay, you can start.
Number 1, component display theory contains simple principles related to teaching, yet the principles are powerful when underutilized. What is one specific principle you can take from this theory and weave into your lesson plan to improve your teaching effectiveness? I said for the purpose of our workshop, I feel that as new instructors or practicum instructors, we have a limit to the scope we can use. With that being said, one thing that I think we can do well with our lesson is to apply new knowledge. We know lots of information that is current and up to date thanks to our schooling, and we can give that information to others within the scope of our practicum.
That's so true. So what I said is something that I love that they mentioned was to have learners, like the audience members, learn and think about their own experiences that illustrate the principles being taught. And I said, I think that it is important for the audience to reflect on the lessons that's being taught to apply to them. Like I was meaning basically whatever is being taught, they should be thinking about how they can apply it or if they've already applied it, because if they can't think of something, then what's the point of being at a workshop if you're not going to take in the things being taught?
Right. I talked about in the next question.
Yeah. Like they all kind of were like the same. So I kind of tried not to write so much for like the first one.
Right.
But, okay. So then the second one, as highlighted on page 84, one of the significant principles illustrated by component display theory is the need to maintain balance between the teacher/leader talking with the participants talking. This balance is critical to the participation and involvement of participants. What are you doing throughout all the lesson plans to create and maintaining this balance? So since we're partners, I basically just wrote down that we like have them involved by having them think of their own experiences in their marriage, giving them handouts, and then to work on like in class, and giving them handouts to take home so that they can personally do it like with their husband and wife on their one-on-one time. But that's kind of what I was thinking.
I said basically the same thing, and I just said that another thing we're doing is giving them small exercises and questionnaires that will get them thinking and help them to apply what we are teaching in a more personal way.
Yeah.
So without asking them to share their personal experiences, the questions, the leading questions that we're asking, and the little simple exercises that we're giving them to do, they're promoting that learning and applying it to them personally.
Yeah.
Okay. Along with component display theory, what time do we start?
I think we started like, I'll just say 8 o'clock. It's 8:06 right now.
Okay.
I'll watch the time.
Along with component display theory, Duncan and Goddard summarized other effective instructional principles that have been taught by David Merrill. Share one principle that was taught in the book that you especially appreciate and will implement in your family life education. I said I think that the one that I liked was using stories that teach the principles. And I like this because in a lot of our stuff, like rather than having the couples share their personal experience, it's easier to show like, I don't know, video clips of like couples going through what we're talking about. Or like in Gottman's book, he shares a lot of like narratives about couples. And I think that that's something that we could really incorporate into our lesson plans, especially because we're talking so much about like Gottman and the love languages. And I even have this book. It's called Love That Lasts, and it's by an LDS couple. They're psychologists, and they have a lot of narratives that go along with what they're talking about. And I'm using that in our lesson plan too.
Cool. Something that I said was that they mentioned the power of demonstration. And I said, I love this because I feel like, I was like, I always feel like I'm the one in the class that like doesn't understand what the instructor's talking about based on like, because I haven't had that experience or like, you know, just kind of like that. And so I like that they said that the instructor needs to demonstrate with like examples, like you were saying, like with videos and things, just giving a visual. I think that's really good. And then I wrote a quote down that I liked that they said in the reading was, the task may seem easy to those who are familiar with the principle and have tried to apply it for years, but the jump from current experience to new performance can be daunting for many learners. I just thought that was a really good quote because I feel like many people are there to learn and they want a new experience, but they don't know how to apply it to their life. So if a leader does give demonstration, I think that'll be more effective than just leaving the learner like to go home and just think about it and have no idea.
Right.
Yeah. Especially I think in our marriage things when like people are like, oh, you can do this in your marriage. And they're like, well, I don't know how to do that like in a certain time. So how should I do it? If they give it direction, then I think it's a lot easier to comprehend.
Well, and with my communication portion that I'm doing, right, that's my
The theory?
no, like for our lesson plan, I'm doing the portion on communications.
No, that was mine in the very top.
Oh, okay, because it doesn't have anything on it, so I assumed it was mine.
Oh, no, I had to leave some blank.
Okay. All right, so after this, we need to talk about who's doing what, because I thought I was doing the communication portion. But, well, when thought I was doing the communication portion, I was going to use part of Gottman's principles, and he gives really good like explanation on how to. Sorry, I got sidetracked. He just gives really good like instead of telling people just go do this, he says this is how to do it. Mm-hmm. So I think that's important for us to do in our lessons.
Yeah. So 4, it says the handbook for SES teaches the leader's discusses the role of the Holy Ghost in learning, especially gospel learning. When teaching family life education, educators will generally be working on non-LDS audiences. When this is the case, does the Holy Ghost play a role in the learning process? Explain. So I basically said, I believe that the Holy Ghost is, even if you're teaching a non-LDS audience or an LDS audience, because that's who teaches you and gives you the answers that you're looking for in a lesson. Like when we teach non-LDS people, they tell us, oh, I'm feeling this feeling, or I know that what you're telling me is true. And that is the Holy Ghost speaking. So I think that like, that people, even if they aren't LDS, will always feel like that, even if it's a lesson that has nothing to do with the church. It's just letting the audience know that what you're teaching them is true. It's not a lie, or they can really take it into their lives and it can better their lives. But that's kind of what I wrote down.
Yeah, and I think that even as instructors, not so much just the participants, the Holy Ghost lets us know what we should be teaching and what we should be saying. Even if it's like a non-LDS group, the Holy Ghost, like if you're presented with a group and sorry, my family is just like there's so much going on. But if you are teaching a group, and I mean, it's going to be, when you're a life educator, you're probably going to have a very diverse group of people. And it's always going to be LDS people, obviously, but you're not going to stand up there and say something that you don't believe is true, because you would be feeling the Holy Ghost and he would be telling you not to say that. So I think that's how he influences us, because even as instructors, he still helps us to know what to say, when to say it, and how to say it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, the next question says, share one specific thought you had from reading the handbook for SES teachers and leaders that you want to incorporate into your teaching. And this specific section I thought was interesting to have us read as like practicum students, but because it's mostly like geared towards CES, and it talks about a lot of the like procedures, I guess is what you would call it.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting to have us read. I'm trying to look for it. I had it pulled up. There it is. And I thought one portion that I thought was interesting that it brought up was that we should be living the gospel. And when I think about that as a family life educator, I mean, if we're not living the gospel, it's going to be really hard for us to do our jobs as family life educators, because we're going to have this like conflict, like inner conflict for ourselves. And it's going to be harder to teach what we should be teaching. And especially when we've learned it from the standpoint from BYU, if you're not living the gospel, it's going to be hard to do your job and to find work opportunities that are in line with what you've been taught through school and what you know how to do through your schooling. So that's kind of that to me.
Yeah, that kind of was what I wrote down, but they mentioned the 3 things that we should do when we're teaching is know, accept, and follow those principles. And I think that was basically what you were saying, is that all the things that we are learning, we should know, and we should, like, by researching them, by getting all these experiences. And then the accepting part is that we should be taking that and accepting it. Yes, this is true, and no, this is not true. And then following those principles is basically living them in our lives. Like, I just think, why would I talk about something that I don't believe or I've never experienced fully to where I could teach someone else? And I think that we should definitely do that with the family, because it's being attacked in this generation. I think that you should really be sticking with the standards of the church, and like you said, living the lives. Because if we go and teach people, then what's the point if we're not even living what we're teaching? So I think that's like super important.
There was a quote in there that I thought was really good. It was from Boyd K. Packer, and it says, "Power comes when a teacher has done all that he can to prepare not just the individual lesson, but in keeping his life in tune with the Spirit. If he will learn to rely on the Spirit for inspiration, he can go before his class, secure in the knowledge that he can teach with inspiration." I mean, as a family life educator, that's pretty like straightforward and to the point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so we're still good on time. So then the next questions are in the same week, but for chapter 5. So it's, as taught in chapter 5, building relationships is a prelude to effective education. What little things can/will be realistically do to build rapport and establish a relationship with participants, whether teaching in a family relations program or a workshop? Something that I wrote down that I really liked is that the teacher needs to learn and respect the audience, because everyone's going to have an opinion. Everyone's going to feel something different towards a certain topic. So I think it's really important still as the teacher, if someone does share, then they still need to respect their thoughts and feelings. Like, I kind of think about it like when we're in like Relief Society, and you know, that one person, you're like, oh, she's going to share again. You know, I still think it's very respectful for the instructor to still let that person share their experiences or thoughts and questions, and still allow that person to feel like they could ask those or give their opinions. Because I have been in classes where the instructor will just like put you down and say, no, that's not correct, and that's kind of weird because that's what they're feeling and that's what they've already experienced. So I think that's a really important thing, because then the audience will feel comfortable enough to engage in your lesson as well.
Right.
So,
yeah, that building rapport with your class is really important. And you do that as you go about the workshop. I know, like, even in workshops I've been in, like, the kinder the instructor is, the more willing to listen they are, the more interaction you get, even just in an hour-long class. Like, if you start out with, no, that's not correct, right at the beginning, and just are not letting people share or not letting people engage, then you're going to get less and less participation.
Yeah.
Most likely you have taught in some setting before, whether it be through your educational training, a mission, or as a missionary in a church setting or some other capacity. What have you learned about involving others in a discussion? I think for me, giving them like time to consider it before they share it. I mean, you have to like consider that into your lesson. You don't want to have so much information that you aren't allowing time for your participants to interact and engage in the lesson.
Yeah. I basically said the same thing. So I just said like, just involve others in it. Like if there is a question, you know, it's okay to pause where you are in your teaching. You should let the audience do that, because then it just feels like to them you're actually wanting to hear from them as well. So that's I basically said the same thing with that one.
Right.
Yeah. So based on what you know about yourself from previous teaching experiences, what mistakes if not carefully, are you likely to make in the future related to involving participants in a discussion? So I said something that I have a problem with is like not knowing when to have the audience stop asking questions, because like back to Relief Society, when you ask one question and then all of a sudden you have a million hands raised, like when is the appropriate time to stop? Because I feel like everybody has something good to say and that could help with the lesson, but like there also needs to be a time when you stop, because you do need to keep on track to finish what you said. So I think, I mean, for our workshop, I think it won't be bad, but like other things, I remember that is one of my hardest things. I feel like I always need to remember to do.
No, I would agree with that, because then you get off on tangents and sometimes debates can come out. Like,
yeah,
I've even seen it in a Relief Society, you know.
Oh yeah.
So, the handbook for CES teachers and leaders is focused on teaching religious education. However, many of the principles are relevant to teaching in any setting, especially education that is focused on strengthening families. What specific principles from the handbook will you apply in your teaching? So sorry, I have it pulled up again. All right, let me read that. So for teaching by the Spirit, I mean, that's a pretty in-depth list that they gave us to look at. And I think it's just, I mean, obviously you want to try to remember all those, but I thought a couple of the interesting ones were that he can bring in ideas, concepts, or principles to remembrance. And he does that both for the instructor and for the learner. I mean, I know that I've been in Relief Society lessons and I've been teaching, and I mean, there might be something that comes up that's not even in my lesson. And I mean, where we want to strive to stay away from that, obviously, for these practicum purposes. But I think when you're a family life educator and you're a little more experienced, I think those things are going to happen. And you're going to remember a story or a video or, you know, an exercise that you could do that are going to help. And I think that when you remember those are influenced by the Spirit. And then, I mean, obviously that you can stand up there and teach all day long, but ultimately the Holy Ghost is going to be the one that teaches your participants what the truth is and what concepts they need to remember. To answer that question?
Yeah. it's like I said the same thing as having the Spirit also teach with you, because like you said, there are going to be things that pop into your head that you're going to want to say, and it's like not even in your lesson plan. I think that is for a reason, because it can help someone else that may need it, and like you don't even need it, but someone else in the audience might need it. And I think that is super important to listen to, because everybody in your workshop is going to learn different things, or certain things are going to stand out that they're going to take into their lives. And so if that one thing that you never planned on touches that one person, then I think that you did your job as the teacher in your workshop, or even like you said, in our future careers. I think that if you touch one person in there, then you actually did your job. So that's I basically said the same thing with the Spirit thing too.
Right.
So concentrating on efforts on what, page 19, to teach while giving little thoughts about how to teach and concentrate or content can be an easy mistake to make. Yet the teaching methods have a profound effect on learning. Therefore, when writing lesson plans, be sure to specify how the content will be taught, including ways to engage participants in the learning process. As you create your lesson plan, what will you do to provide more focus on the how? I thought about this, and we kind of have like those handouts on like how to do certain things. And then also, I like that we're doing like that little mini thing when like for the love languages, like we give them the exact test, like it's the exact way how to find certain things out. Like we're being direct with them. It's not like beating around the bush where they have to guess, like, do I do it this way or do I do it that way? Like we literally give them the paper. So that's kind of what I thought of.
I figured out my mistake on the communication and the supporting the spouse. I get those two flip-flop, but so I'm doing the supporting the spouse theme, and I'm using Gottman's portion on communication, because I think a big way that we support our spouse is through communication, and we open the lines for supporting them through communication. Mm-hmm. But so one thing that I am planning on doing in that is an exercise that he has in his book. And it won't even take the participants a minute, but it gets them thinking, okay. And what it does is asking them basically to circle 3 things that they like that their spouse does that makes them feel like,
oh yeah, I remember
they're heard or appreciated. So I'm doing that. I mean, it won't even take them a minute, but it gets them thinking, and because I mean, even in this packet or whatever this is that they're having us read, the CES packet, when students are bored, they are not ready to learn. Well, I mean, if you give me that quiz and, it gets my attention. So, but I think you can stand up there and talk for an hour, or you can, give interesting information, give interesting exercises without having them, because I know for the purpose of this, we're not supposed to have them share their like super personal stories or make it like counseling type, but you can still get them engaged and get them excited about what they're learning. Yeah. If you're doing it in the right way.
Yeah. We're almost close on time. So do you want to just share what chapter you read for this week?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Or I can do mine first if you're still looking.
Go ahead, yeah.
So I read chapter 9, the marriage and relationship education. And I really like this one because obviously it has to do with ours, but there was like a ton of information. Like I seriously wrote down so much that I have to condense it. But one of the things that really stood out to me, it's like a super simple quote, but like to me, it was like a huge thing. And it said, marriage is the first bond of society. Like, I think that's so big. And I think people kind of forget the importance of marriage, because I hate the saying when people say marriage is just a piece of paper. Like, to me, that's like so degrading, because like if you obviously think that it's just a piece of paper, then you need to go and learn about what marriage is about, or like you need to go figure out why you think that. And like, but I thought that quote, even though it's so small, it's like a huge thing, because I think that if people really, really dug deep into that quote, there would be less divorces, there'd be less fighting, you know. And I just thought that quote was really good for that section. But
I'm looking for, so I actually, since I started this, something that's interested me was the intimacy portion of this, because it's kind of like, I mean, I understand why we don't really want to discuss it in the setting, but so I read the chapter that was on, it's chapter 11, so sexuality education, but it just got me thinking about how like, in like even the culture of the church, it kind of becomes a taboo subject, and that there really is a way to teach it without it being that that taboo subject. And there's actually a marriage, like a LDS marriage intimacy educator, and I think her name's Megan Fife, but and she is awesome, and she has some really good what are they called, podcasts on this subject. And but so I thought it was interesting to read over those chapters and see how like the worldview is changing on intimacy in the marriage, and not necessarily the view on it's changing, but the like that we're starting to concentrate on it and understand that it really is part of the plan of salvation, and it really is important to marriage. And I think that with the divorce rates, we kind of went backwards and stopped recognizing it as an important part, and it's starting to become an important part again. So I thought that was really cool.
Oh, for sure. And then I read that one too, like just for fun, because I also think that that's really important. But like something that I thought of is that like people are focusing more on intimacy in a relationship, whether you're married or not, like if you're just dating, because I think they just don't understand the point of intimacy like we do, like in the LDS church. Like you were saying, it's part of the plan of salvation, but I think that people take it in the wrong context, where they need to be more sexually active together as a couple to connect, but that's not the case. Like I think that they take it out of context. So it's like, I think they just need more education on that topic.
Yeah, and I think it's important to understand that it's like a double-sided thing.
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
There's the emotional and the physical portion of it. So, but I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we're good on our time for this, but do you want me to stop it and then we can just talk about our lesson plan real quick so we're on the same page, or? Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to